Good morning, friends and family. My name is Frederick Gregory, and I'm an intern at CityRise, and I'm genuinely excited to continue our exploration of the Gospel of John, really focusing on the 7 I am statements of Jesus. Last week, Dr. Edworthy walked us through John 10:7 and explained what Jesus meant when he said, I am the door of the sheep. Pastor Mark challenged us in that context that there are many conflicting voices that fight for our attention in this life. There's the voice of the world, there's the voice of legalism, and there's the voice of the Lord. And so which voice are we giving our attention to? And so this week, as we continue the discussion by examining Jesus as the Good Shepherd, and I want to pause for a second and think about this analogy. In World War II, during the infamous D-Day battle, one of the most significant confrontations in military history took place. Let me explain. The Battle of Brecourt Manor during the invasion of Normandy on June 6, 1944, a small group of paratroopers faced a massive German artillery unit strike, unleashing a heavy volume of fire. With guns erupting all around them and confusion everywhere, they found themselves pinned down, staring into the face of certain death. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been to a gun range, but it's a pretty terrifying experience, or at least for me, because I can recall my first time going to a gun range, and if I'm honest, I was terrified. Even though I had noise-canceling earmuffs on, the sound of gunfire terrified me. But I must confess that I've never actually heard an explosion in real life, but I'm just going to guess that it's much louder than a gunshot. So imagine gunfire. Imagine gunfire coming from all different directions. And imagine that at that moment, there was probably not just smoke, but fire and just complete chaos. But in the middle of all of that chaos, one voice cut through the noise, and that was the voice of their leader, a man by the name of Richard Winters. His calm, clear voice gave really crystal clear instructions. He comforted the troops and reminded them if they would just listen, that they would make it out alive, even though he didn't know if they were going to make it out alive. But by listening and trusting that voice, the soldiers not only survived, but their actions saved countless lives, and they actually ended up winning that day. And Winters' leadership would go down to this day to serve as an example of good leadership for generations to follow. Now, as negative as the battlefields of life, I want to ask the question, whose voice are you listening to? When you're in the thunderstorms of life, when there's smoke and there's fire and everything doesn't seem to be going your way, whose voice are you trusting in to lead you and to guide you through the battlefields of life? As we're about to read, Jesus is the Good Shepherd, but he is only the Good Shepherd to those who are willing to trust him in faith to lead and guide them through to victory. So let's pick up in John chapter 10. We're going to read verses 11 through 14. And 11 begins off saying, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, but sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. I lay down my life for the sheep. Now, when we approach this passage, it's easy to treat the Bible like some sort of nefarious spiritual dictionary, a collection of abstract ideas floating outside of time and history. But this is not what the Bible is. We're reading history. Jesus' conversations, his teachings, they all weren't just nice thoughts or cute platitudes, things that we say, but they actually happened at a specific time, in a specific moment, for a very real and important reason. The words of Jesus help set events in motion in history. And when we read the Gospel of John, or John's Gospel, chapter 10, it's important to know that Jesus is at the point of his earthly ministry where he's beginning to confront the religious leaders of his time. We see this conflict is a continuation of what we see in chapter 9, when Jesus heals a man born blind, which leads to his eventual confrontation with the Pharisees. The Pharisees, who were the religious leaders, they were the religious authority of their time, not only came in and questioned the miracle that Jesus had performed in chapter 9, but they even questioned the man's testimony before eventually kicking him out. See, the problem is the Pharisees opposed Jesus. How? By insisting they were the one true shepherds of the people of God, and that Jesus, by nature, was just an imposter to whom the people should vehemently reject. In other words, Jesus versus the Pharisees of their time was a clash of the titans. And Jesus responded by outlining in very detailed notions what a good shepherd is. And he says in verse 11, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Now, I want to give you this point. In order to understand and value what a good shepherd is, we first need to consider the role of a shepherd. What is a shepherd? And what does it mean to be good? So in essence, what is a shepherd and what does it mean to be a good shepherd? So considering the role of a shepherd in our culture is pretty difficult. And I challenge anyone who's listening to my voice right now to find one person that they've actually met in real life that is a real life shepherd by profession. It's difficult for us to value a role that we've never witnessed in real life. Many of us are tempted to picture the shepherd as a romanticized figure, a young man with flowing, beautiful hair, peacefully cradling one shepherd, caressing their wool, but this image is far from the truth. Nighttime in the land of Palestine was extremely dangerous, and in biblical times it was not uncommon to experience lions and wolves and panthers and leopards and bears and hyenas. They were all common in the countryside. Not to mention the life of a shepherd could be extremely dangerous. Now, how do we know that the life of a shepherd is dangerous? Well, in 1 Samuel 17, David confesses that by the time he had faced Goliath, he had already fought a lion and a bear. And we don't know if that was the only time. And we could also look at the life of Jacob. Jacob confesses in Genesis chapter 31, he laments over the enormous drudgery that comes with being a shepherd and potentially losing one of his sheep. So a shepherd in biblical times was not only a protector, he was a caretaker, he was a provider, and he was a leader of an entire group of sheep, responsible for their well-being and their survival. And in sometimes they often operated in pretty harsh environments. Shepherding was not an easy job, and it was not a job for the weak. Jesus is the good shepherd because Jesus is the good shepherd because of his willingness to sacrifice, to love, to provide, and defend us, even if it cost him his life. Just let that sink in for a moment. Jesus is the good shepherd because he loves us so much that he's willing to lay down his life just for you and me. This highlights in verse 11 the depth of love and commitment that Jesus has for creation. A good shepherd, again, is one who is willing to put himself last and others first. It's also fascinating to remember that sheep were a fundamental source of income in biblical times, even for survival. And here's some of the reasons why sheep were so important and invaluable in those communities. One was food. Lamb and mutton were an important source of meat for early people in biblical times. Milk, sheep's milk was used for drinking and making cheese. Wool was essential for clothing, blankets, and other things. They were also used to trade and to barter. So if you had a lot of sheep, you could consider them a form of commodity or currency. But in Scripture, what's interesting to note is that sheep were not only valuable, but they were a central figure in the livelihood of those who lived in biblical times. And so let's compare that, right? In Scripture, we are depicted as sheep, and this point should highlight the value that we have in the eyes of our Creator. Your life is valuable. You are of great importance in the eyesight of Jesus. Another interesting fact to consider is that in biblical times, it was uncommon to have multiple shepherds per flock. This is the reason and the true reason why the Pharisees hated Jesus. Let's continue reading for a moment. Pick me up in verse 12. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. He flees because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. What is Jesus saying here? So Jesus is comparing his leadership to that of the Pharisees. And he's more than likely making this statement in front of the Pharisees, because Jesus contrasts the good shepherd with someone who is only in it for the wages and doesn't have a genuine care for the sheep. When danger comes, the hired hand will abandon the flock because they have no real personal stake in their well-being. See, prior to Jesus' ministry, the Pharisees had been the primary shepherds of the people of Israel for over 500 years. The Pharisees are often misunderstood in our society. In the beginning, the Pharisees were the spiritual caretakers of the people of God. They were trusted leaders who were tasked with leading, caring, loving, and even protecting the people of Israel. But over time, just like many of us, they lost their way. They became distracted by money, pride, power, ego, fame. They lost sight of their role and eventually placed their own ambitions over the livelihood of the people of God. So when Jesus says, I am the door, I am the narrow path that few will find, it's confusing to the nation of Israel because they had become so accustomed to being led by the Pharisees. See, essentially you had two conflicting voices. You had two shepherds fighting for the attention of the people. And I tell you right here and right now that what's true for the nation of Israel in the time of Jesus is true for the universal church today. And this is the reason why many of us will never experience Jesus as the Good Shepherd. Our eyes and our attention are focused on other voices and other shepherds. So who is the shepherd that you listen to the most? If we're honest, there are three primary shepherds that we tend to trust more than we trust Jesus. Those shepherds' names are really personal. It is me, myself, and I. Oh, we say, Jesus, take the wheel, but we really trust our own reasoning. We place our faith in our own ability to discern what's best for our lives. We trust our own desires, our own wisdom, believing that our way is somehow better than the pathway that Jesus has for us. And this is why many of us will never truly experience Jesus as the Good Shepherd. And make no mistake about it, just as in biblical times it was rare to have multiple shepherds, Jesus is not willing to share the leadership role with anyone, including you, including me. It's kind of like this. Oftentimes in this Christian life, we follow the path that's most comfortable for us. And then when we get in trouble or we get into a scenario where we can't find our way out or we can't see the light at the tunnel, oftentimes we'll scream, Jesus, take the wheel. Jesus, lead, guide, and direct me, right? And then Jesus will lovingly come in, check all the boxes, lead us to the place that we always wanted to go. And then right after that, we'll grab the steering wheel and pretend as if we're the ones that got us there in the first place. And then we'll let Jesus know, thank you, but next time it's on me somehow. This is not what it means to trust and to experience Jesus as the Good Shepherd. And I don't know if you've experienced this in your life, but listening to conflicting voices is a recipe for danger. It's a recipe for disaster. If you try to be the leader of your life, you will experience difficulty just like the Pharisees. Experiencing the Good Shepherd demands exclusivity. Jesus is not willing to share his role. So in order to experience Jesus as the Good Shepherd, you must first learn to trust him regardless of your circumstances, to trust him regardless of what the outcome may look like. His ways are higher than ours, and in an effort to experience Jesus in his proper role, you must be willing to trust. Let's continue reading. In verse 14, Jesus says, I am the Good Shepherd. He says it again. I know my own and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, I know the Father. And I lay down my life for the sheep. Now, here's another reason many of us will never experience Jesus as the Good Shepherd, and it's because we don't know him. I want to say that one more time. One of the primary reasons why many of us will never truly experience Jesus as the Good Shepherd is because we don't know him personally. The word here, know, conveys in Greek a sense of familiarity through relationship. The word know, notice the word know is actually mentioned 4 times in these 2 verses. Now, I don't know about you all, but when I was a kid, if my father said something 4 times, it would be in my best interest to pay attention and to listen. So in order to experience Jesus as the Good Shepherd, you must first be in relationship with him. Many of us grew up in church. We know the Bible. We know about God. We even know how to worship. But all of those things are valuable. Don't get me wrong. They're all valuable, but they mean nothing, absolutely nothing if you don't know him. Matthew 7:21 says, on that great day, there will be many that are in the presence of God, and they'll say, Lord, 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 haven't I casted out demons? Haven't I done this and done that in your name? And he'll say, depart from me. Why? For I never knew you. Knowing Jesus requires 3 things. And before we get into those 3 things, I want to give you an example. This is an example that was given to me when I was younger in my faith to help really emphasize the importance of having a personal relationship with Jesus. Imagine getting a knock on the door and a complete stranger shows up to your front door and says, hey, my name is Henry. Hey, my name is Lisa. I'm here. I'm ready to move in. I've got my bags. Show me to my room. What would be your response? Most of us would say, no, right? I've never met you. I don't know you, right? And so because we don't have a relationship, I am by no means obligated to allow you to live with me and to be in my presence. And the same is true about Jesus with us. On that great day, there will be many. There will be many, but it is all about knowing him, having a relationship with him. Now, knowing Jesus as the Good Shepherd requires 3 commitments and 3 commitments only. The first is faith. According to Hebrews 11, faith is the substance of what we hope for and the evidence of what we can't see. Because I am found in Jesus Christ, I place my faith in Jesus as the living evidence that one day I will receive the ultimate victory in Christ Jesus. The second is trust. You must be willing to trust God's plan for your life over your own. It involves not only dying to self, but trusting that God's ways are higher than yours. And because God sees past, present, and future, you need to trust him over your own ability to rationalize and figure things out on your own. Trusting God requires us to take a humble and honest look at our lives. Is Jesus the one leading us, or are we being led by our own comfort, our own desires, our own ambitions? Trusting Jesus is almost impossible if you're not willing to give up comfort and control. Now, the third thing is a continual thing, and that is sacrifice. Trusting Jesus is a sacrifice. Following Jesus costs. And in order to experience Jesus as the Good Shepherd, we must be willing to sacrifice everything to be led by him. Now, let me explain it this way. Asking God to lead you is not a cheap one-time experience. It costs everything: your time, your pride, your money, your comfort, your desire to be in control. It is an agreement that must be entered into every single day. You must learn to die to your own desires, to lead your own life on a daily basis. This is why it requires a sacrifice. But in the end, Jesus promises that if you delight yourself in him, he will give you the desires of your heart. Experiencing Jesus as the Good Shepherd requires unwavering faith, uncompromising trust, and a determination to sacrifice so that Jesus can take the wheel of the ship and navigate you through the battlefields of this thing called life. Now, I want everyone to close their eyes just for a second. I want you to imagine that you've signed up for a guided tour going through the Grand Canyon. You're excited to see the breathtaking views, to learn about its history, to experience its vastness, the beauty and the splendor of just how grand this place actually is. The tour guide is an expert. They know the safest paths, they know the most stunning overviews, and all the hidden gems that are sprinkled throughout according to the path. And they have a map, but more importantly, they have a plan. The experience to lead you on an unforgettable journey is what they're aiming to do. But here's the thing. The tour guide's expertise, their knowledge, and their ability to lead only matter if you are willing to follow. If you wander off on your own, ignore the instructions, or insist on taking a different path, you may actually miss out on the best that the Grand Canyon has to offer. You might even get lost. You might encounter danger or fail to see the beauty they show because you chose your own way, because you chose your own path. And what's similar about that is similar to the way that Jesus is our good shepherd. He knows the path of life. He knows the danger. He knows the destination. He offers to guide us, to lead us to green pastures and still waters, to protect us from the wolves and the bears and the lions, and ultimately to bring us to our eternal home. He is the good shepherd. But, and this is crucial, for him to be the good shepherd in our lives, we must be willing to follow him. His guidance, his protection, his love are all available to us. But they are fully experienced by those who choose to listen to his voice, trusting his leadership and sacrifice to stay close to him. The question this morning is not, is Jesus the good shepherd, but are you willing to follow? Thank you for your time. My name is Frederick Gregory, and I appreciate you listening.